Hello there, welcome to this edition of Global Business Africa on the 16th of October 2014. We've got plenty lined up for you. We'll be live in Joburg shortly talking about labour relations in South Africa, but there's plenty more coming from all corners of Africa. Here's what's coming up. Somalia continues its inexorable march towards a recovery to rebuilding its economy. Labour relations in South Africa are still as tense as ever. We'll have the details on the De Beers deal. And the South African Development Corporation will be developing infrastructure by eliminating some deal risk. We'll have the details. Let's start in Somalia, a country that has had no postal services to speak of for well over 2 decades. Now, however, it's receiving international mail once again. The first phase in restoring normal postal services is being able to receive letters from abroad and getting those to the intended target. That is now available. The next goal for Somalia's Ministry of Post and Telecommunication is sending letters abroad. The Universal Postal Union is now assisting the Somali Postal Service to redevelop its capacity, including providing technical assistance and basic mail processing equipment. The postal system will be implemented throughout the country through a new postal coding and numbering system.
The postal service of the country was not functioning for the past 24 years. But now, after huge efforts, we started to deliver mail to the country and its regions. This is successfully functioning now.
Now, ahead of World Food Day in the next 24 hours, Somalia has held its first Farmers' Day, bringing together government officials, academics and associations of Somali farmers. Participants celebrated achievements made over the last 2 years, which have led to an increase in agricultural exports. Somalia's farming is mostly concentrated in the southern part of the country, based on access to the Juba and Shebele rivers. Agricultural communities in south-central Somalia have been severely affected by conflict and recurrent drought in the last 2 decades, and that has resulted in a widespread failure of crops and fairly poor yields. The federal government says that is now changing, and it is committed to helping farmers enhance their productivity.
The Ministry of Agriculture has planned to revive rice farming. Export will be changed within local production, and we will closely work with rice farmers in Middle Shebele and Lower Shebele regions of the country.
Let's move on to South Africa, where the South African arm of the Anglo-American Diamond Company, De Beers, has narrowly avoided a strike by signing a 3-year wage deal with one of the biggest labour unions in the country. Talks between De Beers Consolidated Mines and the National Union of Mine Workers had stalled for quite a while, and that compelled a government labour mediator to step in and take the talks forward. Both sides have now settled on a 9% wage hike, backdated to the 1st of May, and the same percentage will apply over the next 2 years. The deal affects about 1,700 workers at the company's 4 operations throughout South Africa. Let's get some more details on this development. Angelo Koppel, of course, has been keeping a close eye on developments in South Africa's mining sector. He's live with us from Johannesburg right now. Angelo, these talks initially had stalled, as we mentioned, before a government mediator stepped into the fray. What were both sides initially unable to agree on?
Well, Raman, more of the same really, because in 2013 they also reached a compromise agreement, and the union then demanded some 13% and management offered around 6%, and they settled on a figure in between the two. So what we're having right now is the fact that what's going to happen really is that the NUM are going to keep an eye on this, because they're not actually allowed to strike at this point. The problem here is that the challenge might be that AMCU starts making some inroads into this. So while we have this agreement and they've settled and they've agreed on it, looking forward is the major concern for us here, because if they have a 3-year agreement, AMCU could start making inroads next year or the year after while this term is still happening, and make promises, gain some members from NUM, and then they'll probably start renegotiating or threaten to go on strike again. So for now, what we have is the current deal is not in jeopardy, it's in place, but we're not going to preempt any issues by saying possibly AMCU might step into the fray at the moment.
Indeed. Some platinum and gold miners like Harmony Gold, for example, have hinted at job cuts in some form or other. Is NUM still skeptical that job cuts are necessary for the survival in a fiscal sense of some mines in South Africa?
Well, Raman, I smile a little because unions and union leadership have to be skeptical, because if there's any kind of talk of strike or of laying off their members, they of course won't get any fees and they'll lose membership. So what's going to happen is that Labour will remain the low-hanging fruit in the mining sector because they're the cheapest unit cost. And on the other hand, though, it's easy for mine management to close down shafts and retrench people and make those savings to become profitable again. So the reducing of the overheads works in the short term, but it doesn't work in the long term. Raman?
Indeed, Cupertino a rock and hard place in a literal sense. Finally, Lonmin, of course, did dismiss reports of possible job cuts in late August, fairly ferociously, I might add. Is that still the position despite its rapid return to full production?
Well, true to form, Lonmin aren't saying anything at the moment. They're being very quiet. I did, however, manage to chat to a spokesperson at Implats, and he's saying to me that at the moment, labour or retrenchments aren't on their radar. And what's happening at Implats is kind of what's happening in the rest of the platinum sector. Everybody's feeling vulnerable right now. And in fact, the spokesperson mentioned to me that there's probably about 80% of the platinum industry who are on this kind of borderline position at the moment where they're very vulnerable, they're not sure what's happening, productivity's down, there have been some accidents, some deaths regrettably, and that's causing shafts to be closed, which brings production down slightly. So, as I said, 80% currently unviable, and he's suggesting, his words were that these aren't sustainable. The business isn't sustainable at this level right now, but the world needs the metal. So it's in everybody's interest to ensure that the industry in South Africa, which provides 70% of platinum stockpiles into the world, is actually made more viable again. Raman?
Indeed, Angelo Kopler there live in South Africa. We're still in that country. Unemployment numbers do continue to rise in South Africa. More and more young people are entering the job market, but they're only finding no jobs at all. Weak local and global growth is only making matters even more difficult. Angelo filed this report and a new plan in the petroleum and energy sectors in South Africa that might provide some hope.
Statistics reveal that between 1994 and 2014, employment in the country rose by 6.2 million people, while the labour force grew by 8.7 million people. Government is trying to address the issue and recently created a Department of Small and Medium Enterprises. But it seems that a business sector is taking action and building micro enterprises.
We believe now we can really change the lives of young people and really make them turn their dream into sustainable businesses that can create jobs as well as put food on the table for their families, for their communities.
It's not easy being entrepreneurial and successful. There is a key challenge.
It's not finance, it's a compelling economic right to exist. Do they have the right product that they can sell to a market that wants it at a profit? And most, and I underline, most entrepreneurs that come through to us don't get that right up front.
Finding successful entrepreneurs who have been through programs can be a challenge because one of the signs of a successful entrepreneur is someone who has tried and failed several times. They are successful because they've learned lessons along the way. For ice manufacturer Motseletsi, it's very simple.
One thing that I've learned is to know the business programs, is to learn how to balance your books, is to learn how to run your business, to talk to people, how to present yourself on clients, how to respond to their needs and to build your profile out of those issues.
For the new candidates coming into the program, the business skills will be taught, and if they are adopted, the chances of success are improved. But you still need the big idea.
I'm looking at renewable energy. It actually fits perfectly like a glove within the Shell sector. It's actually focused more into the service stations. What we've looked at into the service stations is that electricity is a very, very high overhead. So what we try to do is that we're trying to bring in renewable energy to try and reduce that.
While the newly created SME government department is wading through red tape and overlapping responsibilities with other government departments before they can add value to the unemployed and those potential entrepreneurs out there looking for business, there's a corporate out there getting the ball rolling. Clearly they have a vested interest because they've identified gaps in their value chain, but entrepreneurs will benefit. I'm Angelo Kopler for CCTV in Johannesburg.
Quick run through the equity markets here for you. Another red day across the board. Yesterday, of course, was absolutely terrible for the JSE, down about 200 basis points. Today, a bit of recovery, up by about 0.4. Different story, however, in Nigeria, down by 2 percentage points. The sell-off is broadly driven by jitters sparked off by the decline in oil prices and the knock-on effect, of course, on Nigeria's economy. Also in Egypt, the rout continues. It was up by about 0.2 yesterday. Today, however, down by over 3%. The sell-off essentially correlated directly with what's happening elsewhere in Europe and, of course, the United States. Kenya signed an EPA with the EU, but higher taxes are still in place for a while. And how exactly will the Southern African Development Corporation finance infrastructure development? We'll have the details next. Africa is on the move. It's home to 7 of the world's 10 fastest growing economies. We help you make sense of the fast changing African business landscape. We take you where the business is happening.
The rebasing of Nigeria's GDP has been a long time in coming.
The information provides us much more scope to know what the structure of the economy is.
It's 18:11 GMT. You're watching Global Business Africa. Let's take it to East Africa, where despite a deal on an economic partnership agreement, flour vegetable exporters in Kenya will still have to foot an additional $7.5 million every month in export taxes. Simple reason is they signed this deal after the October 1st deadline. Now, it will take up to 6 months for the deal to be ratified, the deal signed this week, Tuesday rather, to be ratified by the EU before Kenyan exports can then regain preferential access. However, in a break from traditional practice, the East African community is now working on being reimbursed for the taxes that will be paid before the EU ratifies the EPA.
We are in agreement. We have met in this boardroom quite a number of times. We have a technical team composed of both the private sector and our technical people to work out the best method of cushioning this. And I hope that our engagement with the EU might provide even a further reprieve. But between now and the time that we start the duty-free access, the meaning is that the exporters to the EU cumulatively will have to pay 670 million per month.
Comments there from one of Kenya's lead negotiators, Mr. Karanja Kibicho. Let's move on to Southern Africa. Countries over there can now draw on a fund which will focus on financing feasibility studies and due diligence for large capital-intensive projects in the region. Ideally, that should make it easier for either governments or private sector players to undertake large infrastructure projects. Farai Mokutuya has more on the details on that on What's Hot tonight.
The SADC Power Preparation and Development Facility, PPDF, will provide a minimum grant of $250,000 and has a bias towards road, rail, shipping, energy generation, ICT, water and sanitation projects. A number of countries in the region are dogged by power shortages, and many of the road and rail networks are in need of upgrades. Leaders of the 15-member bloc agreed in August to industrialize as a catalyst for economic growth, and the implementation of infrastructure projects will facilitate this. In the past, capital projects have been delayed by failure to raise money for preparatory work even before hitting the ground. But that should be a thing of the past, as the fund will pay for pre-feasibility and feasibility studies, economic and financial analyses, tender preparation costs, legal and transaction advisory services costs.
We're seeing a lot of inquiries that are coming. particularly on key infrastructure sort of sectors, your energy requirements. For power projects, in terms of critical scale type of projects, you take anything between 3 to 5 years to realize a project. So I think the point is to get started. And once you get started, I'm sure you can then be able to realize some of the timelines to bridge the gap in terms of our energy requirements.
Beneficiaries under the facility will meet at least 5% of the total cost of the proposed project preparatory activity. Farang Makutuya, CCTV, Harare, Zimbabwe.
China has been the biggest single trading partner for sub-Saharan African countries collectively since 2009. Now, growing trade ties between these two sides has prompted a rise in demand for financial services tailored for Chinese firms setting up in countries in Africa, like Uganda, for example. Michael Baleke filed this report from Kampala.
Like many parts of Africa, major projects worth billions of dollars are underway in Uganda. Many of these ventures are run by Chinese companies. So local banks are now offering financial services to facilitate trade for the Asian giants doing business in Uganda.
With the uniqueness of China in doing business elsewhere, we found it necessary to at least have a dedicated desk, a dedicated resource or resources to be able to harness those opportunities between Uganda, between Africa and China.
The bank says it also coordinates with financial institutions in China to facilitate the transfer of clients' funds, and the measures being taken are paying off.
Talking about maybe 2 years ago, let's say we had about 2 or 3 clients. And now, 2 years later, you're talking about 3. I'm talking about the 30 solid clients, along with a host of other individuals who've come in. As you know, if you go around town now, you find traders. We have a lot of traders who bring merchandise from China.
Chinese companies in Uganda are involved in investments such as oil and gas, infrastructure like railways and road projects, telecommunication, manufacturing, and agribusiness. A recent report by Uganda's Investment Authority shows that 75% of all licensed projects in the country are Chinese. The China desk has helped overcome, among other things, language and cultural barriers between Uganda and China. In fact, the desk provides customized solutions to its Chinese clients. The desk is manned by Chinese staff who have helped clients gain confidence and trust in Uganda's banking system.
Some Chinese people, they come to Uganda, their English are not very good. So I feel a problem when they communicate with the local people. They don't understand each other. But when they see me, when I come there and help them to do some business, they will feel very comfortable because we can understand each other.
There is growing interest by Chinese and African business people to use financial providers with a presence in several countries, because this makes banking transactions easier. EcoBank Uganda is one of those with branches in 36 countries. According to the World Economic Outlook, China is one of the leading investors on the African continent, with total trade volume standing at $200 billion at the end of 2013. With trade set to increase further, banks like EcoBank Uganda are set to see demand for their specialist services rise even further. Michael Baleke, CCTV, Kampala.
As far as commodities are concerned, the story is all about oil. Fresh 4-year lows are actually hit earlier today around the 83.40, 83 or so mark, but there was a bit of a spike in trading around midday over in the United States. Some think perhaps the decline rather since June has been overdone. Whether or not that's the case, we'll find out tomorrow. When we come back, we'll bring you the tale of an entrepreneur who's cashing in on electronic waste in South Africa. Stay on Global Business. Welcome back to the program. You're still watching Global Business Africa. Now, for some, garbage is just a public nuisance, if you will. For others around the world, however, it's big business. It's an enormous opportunity for companies and individuals who are becoming increasingly creative in exploiting the economic potential of waste and repurposing materials that normally would just end up on a dump site somewhere. These entrepreneurs are not only reducing the load on landfills, but they're also creating much sought-after products from discarded materials. In Grassroots tonight, we feature Aubrey Situ, a young entrepreneur who's turning electronic trash into cash.
My name is Aubrey Situ. I come from Matatiele, Eastern Cape. I am 39 years old. I am living in Katomena, Mayville.
Despite the humble surroundings, Situ is actually an e-waste entrepreneur who started a business literally from garbage.
At the present moment, I'm doing jewelry out of using circuit boards. That is, by using circuit boards, the thing is I'm trying to do what government is always telling people, that is by recycling and reducing waste that goes to landfills, or even that ends up in our waterways or in the ocean, endangering our animals or even our lives as people.
Before this, Situ had a number of odd jobs interspersed with periods of unemployment, and he often relied on his elderly parents for financial support until he found a magazine on the road that changed his life.
I saw a story about a certain gentleman who is reusing plastic containers and making like decorative lights.
The article sparked Situ's imagination, and he began researching recycling and upcycling and decided to use discarded computer circuit boards to make jewelry.
I went to the library and read the books about how to make jewelry. Then now I just made some few necklaces and some few earrings, and a person saw me wearing this bracelet, and that person was interested because she even asked me to personalize the bracelet for her. Then that's when also I even saw that even other people are interested in my products. This is a necklace. I made it out of circuit boards.
Situ now sells his work at art galleries and craft markets to local and international tourists.
It is better because I am now employed, like I am self-employed. This business has changed my life by, like for instance, now I managed to buy food, and that is to buy food for my brother and even for my parents at home. My parents are very happy about what I'm doing because they are encouraging me to do these things, because they themselves they said, no, this is something that is new, something which even they haven't seen anyone doing it. Now they are the people who are always motivating me to keep going.
And Situ's plans for the business include uplifting those less fortunate than himself.
At the present moment, I am working from home, but my dream is to get a factory, a place whereby I can be able to employ those people who are unemployed, so that even they themselves can be able to support their families.
And his ambition does not end there. Situ's dream job is to eventually trade in precious metals and stones. Sumitra Nadu, CCTV, Durban.
Now, the 2014 Global Automotive Forum kicked off on Thursday in central China's city of Wuhan. The city, of course, is putting on quite the show to rival that of the traditional auto hubs in China, namely Beijing and Shanghai. This comes at a time of more regulatory scrutiny and slowing sales growth. CCTV's Xie Cheng is in Wuhan to find out what gear the industry over there is currently driving in.
Never mind antitrust probes, the buzz is still about growth in the world's largest auto market. Priority number one, what Chinese car buyers want and how they could afford it.
Decline of small cars. So overall, the car size is increasing, which means people are buying more SUVs, MPVs, and we expect that percentage to go up from currently about 26% to 30 and 40% over the next few years. We see increasing sales with automatic transmissions, engines being downsized. We have seen more asset-backed securities sold this year than in any year before. And this allows consumers to buy cars faster than they could otherwise. And that trend we expect to be one of the key drivers in the car market.
This market is getting pickier. VCG Consulting finds that among all car buyers looking to trade up, 3/4 of them want to switch brands. Marco Garrett, partner at the consulting firm.
In the sales process, have to go a step further and actually start approach the customers that are currently owning your car earlier, so that at the moment they start up the repurchase process, that you are actually in the front runner seat. But in the future, when financial services, after sales costs, used car prices become important, you're actually going to have a much different perspective when it comes to total cost of ownership of a car, and then customers will actually see that loyalty has a certain value.
You can see the uphill battle for Chinese homegrown brands right here. Even in Wuhan, China's upcoming Motown, the best-selling cars are made by joint venture brands. But some companies are trying hard to change that.
So we see from some of the privately owned car companies, Geely, Great Wall, BYD, they've been very successful, being much more exposed to the market. They've built their capabilities. They still have a long way to go, but they've done it fairly quickly. Whereas some of the Chinese state-owned enterprises who have joint venture partners have been a little more slow.
It's no time to be complacent. China's September car sales were the weakest in more than a year, with consumers wanting more high-tech and sophisticated designs. Some companies are looking to directly acquire expertise.
Yeah, those are typically small to medium-sized companies overseas that have one particular product area as focus, could be engine, drivetrain related or interior related products that are being acquired for technology access.
China's Auto Association has cut its forecast for 2014 vehicle sales as economic growth stalls and more cities consider purchase restrictions. But there is one upside: cheaper fuel prices. Xia Cheng, CCTV, Wuhan.
Quick run through currencies here for you. Of course, the rising strength of the US dollar is giving bit of a jitter, of course, to some of these currencies. What we're keeping our eyes on, however, is African sovereign debt. Yields did spike in light of the reasons. Sell-off, Nigeria, Nigeria's $500 million 2023 bond up 43 basis points. We're seeing a broad pattern reflected right across other sovereign issues. Zambia, Kenya, Ghana, you name it. We'll keep tabs on this trend for you right here on Global Business. Now, here's what we're working on for tomorrow's program. Kenya will officially launch its major jump into geothermal energy. We'll have the details on that. And the EU is moving to address Kenyan farmers' concerns over export tariffs. We'll still be keeping tabs on the EPA story in a lot of detail right here for you on Global Business Africa. But that's it for this edition of the program. On the day when, of course, the death toll from Ebola is well over 4,400 persons. You know the usual drill. Feedback to Global Business Africa at cctv.com. Check us out on Facebook and Twitter as well. The news continues over there when we're not on the airwaves. Thank you for watching. I'm Raman Yam.